You know, well, I better start with the announcements. If I get into my lesson, I won't be able to back up and go to my announcements. It was brought to our attention that just this last evening and this morning that the weather's not as bad as we thought it might be, and we don't have a lot of openings. There's a lot going on towards the end of the year. In December, we've got a lot of activities going on, a lot of things going on, people out of town, in town, and traveling and shopping and doing all these things. It was brought to our attention that some of the ladies wanted to do a singing, and there really wasn't a good place to do it, to do some caroling. And so we asked around this morning, and since the other teen thing was canceled, we were offering a singing or a caroling tonight. If you want some of the young ones to go, myself and Amanda or someone will drive a van, and we're going to make it very simple. Just if you want to bring some finger foods, just bring them, and we'll do it after services tonight. We're going to go to the nursing home, and we just saw it maybe as an opportunity to go ahead and do that because I knew some had wanted to do that. So it's short notice. But if you want to come, that'd be great. We'll do it right after services. I know our 4-H group wanted to do it, and I know several others wanted to as well. So bring finger foods, and we'll take the kids, and y'all have time to get that together, and we'll have a little meal afterwards. Seems like there's another announcement, but I can't remember. John Jones, if you've picked up a Bible or inadvertently picked up a Bible and you find the name John Jones on it, or if you can look in the pew around you, maybe in the things in front of you, he's asked me several times to help him find his Bible. And you got it. I've sent him to that pew 3 times. It's all right, so we got it. All right. That's a good start this morning. Also, I think it was mentioned Lee Brewer's Bible's been misplaced as well since we talked about John's, and so if you come across it, anybody find it? He said he had a lot of help at home, a lot of folks helping him clean up and straighten up, and someone may have put it somewhere. So we'll see. We'll be hoping he finds that. All right, our influence is what I want to talk about this morning. I want to discuss our influence. You know, whether we're very wealthy or very poor, or whether we're young or whether we're old, whether we know it or not, whether we're good or whether we're bad, influence is still going to be something that's part of our lives. Influence is going to be something that all of us, that none of us can avoid. It's been stated that all of us have it. You know, I'm influenced by the things around me. All of us are influenced by those things we come in contact with, our environment, our friends, our family, our where we work. We're influenced. We have it. We're influenced by our televisions. We're influenced by radio. But have you thought about the fact, and I think we need to think about it today very keenly, is the fact that we possess it. You ever thought about it? Influence, we don't ever, we talk about influence and our influence on others, but we all have it, and we're all influenced in some way, shape, form, or fashion, but we all have it as well. One little boy was out shopping, Christmas shopping with his mother, and they'd been shopping all day, and the mother was talking to the cashier at one store, and she says, "Yeah, he's been good all day. He's been with me all day, and he hadn't been complaining." And the cashier said, "Well, he needs a lollipop." So he gave him a lollipop, and the mother looked at the boy and said, "Now, what do you say?" And he says, "Charge it." Influence is pretty powerful, isn't it? We possess influence. And so, in a more positive way, I guess, there was one evangelist who was placed in a difficult work. In 1848, he was placed on a small inhabited island that had never really been evangelized. There were some English-speaking families on the island, and he was there 24 years. His name was John Getty. Not Gotti, but Getty. And John was on that island for 24 years. And he passed away due to an illness. They placed a stone there to memorialize him. And it said when he landed in 1848, there were no Christians. When he died in 1872, there were no heathens. Influence. Powerful, isn't it? Very powerful. We possess it, and we ought to do things with it. We ought to use it in a right way. Our text, I was asked about the text this morning, and I thought, well, I really don't have one text that measures all this in just a few words. But I always like to think about influence when I think about Matthew 5, verse 16. It says, "Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." I want us to recognize that we have a great responsibility. We have a choice about what our influence will be. And we have to make a decision. What am I going to do with my influence? Because I've already established the fact, and each of us has to have this in our mind. Not only, I don't care if I feel like I'm a nobody, I possess influence. Even my negativity can influence others, right? Good or bad. I possess influence. And I receive influence. So those two things are always going to be. Even the absence of someone can produce influence or produce someone thinking about, well, where is so-and-so? Why aren't they at services? I wonder what's wrong. Maybe I wonder if it's a decision they've made. So we recognize that. We must recognize that we have it and we possess it. But I've also got to recognize there's great value in it. There's great value in influence. What about in a name? What about in our name? Look at Ecclesiastes 7 verse 1. It says, "A good name is better than precious ointment." And now I like how the writer here, Solomon, he says, "In the day of death than the day of one's birth." And then in verse 2 it says, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart." Why would he put a good name is better than precious ointment, and then go talking about the comparison or contrast between life and death and living worldly or living the way we ought to, or death to this world? Because a good name has great value. Great value. Many a person has hindered the work or hindered even their secular work by not having a good name. By not having a name that's known about town as someone who's honest and faithful. You know, even as preachers, I think sometimes we protect our good name even when we don't feel like we did anything wrong. I think I've been in that situation a time or two. I'm sure most preachers have. But I imagine it's that way for everybody. That name is far more valuable than my pride. That name is far more valuable to the work of the church. And as Christians, our names are far more valuable than just being right. I have a very dear friend of mine who is convinced, and it's impossible, I think, to convince him of anything else, but his opinion is right, and it will always be right. You ever met anybody like that? I hope, I don't want to be like that. We've got to be open, don't we? His opinion's always right, and I think he's wrong sometimes. But he doesn't think he is. But you know, we've got to be careful even with the truth, don't we? Even when we're right, we've got to say it in a loving way, and we've got to be and demonstrate it in a loving way and be loving in all of our actions. In Proverbs 22 and verse 1, it says, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold." What that tells me is that there's nothing on this earth as valuable as my good name. My good name. Now let's take this a step further. Now, Tye Barnett, that's my name, and I try, and I fail sometimes to carry a good name. I try, and I think it's a good name. I'm proud of my name. I'm not ashamed for anybody to know me or the things I've done. I've lived my life, and I hope I'm responsible. But what about what's more important? It's not about Tye Barnett or Bobby Tatum or anybody else. It's about this other name I wear as well, isn't it? The name Christian. That's a pretty good name, isn't it? Now, if I am Tye Barnett wearing the name Jesus Christ or Christian as being from Him or through Him or covered by Him, then I can look at this and I can read it again. It says a good name is rather to be chosen over great riches. That tells me if I'm a faithful Christian, is better than anything else that this world can give me. That's a good name. And that's an even better influence, isn't it? A great influence. And loving favor rather than silver and gold. I want to know, or people to know, that my name is something that's not important to me. I want to live uprightly before the world. But what I really want people to know about is not the fact that Tye Barnett is upright, but that Tye Barnett is a Christian. And by the fact that I wear the name Christian, I wear it and I live it before all those people in front of me, all those people that see me. It's stated that on the Titanic there were 11 millionaires that went down with the Titanic. Major A.H. Puchin, I don't know, I was hoping I could pronounce that right, but it's Puchin, said in a statement he survived, and he went into his cabin, and he knew the approximate value of the things in his locker. There was cash and jewelry and some gold, and he had over $300,000 at that time. He had over $300,000 in that locker. He said the ship was sinking. He grabbed 3 oranges instead. Let all that stuff go down with the ship. 3 oranges. He knew what real value was. He appreciated the value of life. We've got to appreciate that this world is never going to give me anything more valuable and more precious than His name, than Christ's name, Christian. That I wear that with pride, and I wear that with loving kindness in my heart for what's been given to me. What about what we say? What about the things we say? Matthew chapter 12, beginning in verse 34. We've got great influence in the things we say. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A man out of his good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things. And an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. What we say really does matter. The old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is fictitious, isn't it? It's not true. Words hurt a lot. One doctor of psychology was studying about the problems that destroy unions, destroy marriages. And in marital researchers, in this study they studied couples over the course of years, over even decades, and they retraced the steps of those who had split back all the way to their wedding day, and those that had remained faithful and affectionate. Now, at the beginning, all of these newlyweds were very similar. They had a few fights here and there. They had a few things go wrong. But yet the psychologist Cliff Norreus of the Catholic University of Howard and Howard Markman of the University of Denver studied newlyweds. And in that first decade, the couples would ultimately stay together. They made 5 out of every 100 comments. They made 5 of those comments bad. They were put downs or negatives. 5 out of every 100. Now, among the couples that later split, the difference was only 10 out of every 100 comments in that first year of marriage were negative or put downs. Not a big difference, is it? The words that I say are so very important. How I use the words that I have are very important. One researcher said that the average person only knows about 10,000 words. The journalist, a professional journalist, knows between 15 and 16,000 words. There are over 800,000 words to be known. 300,000 words of our English language are technical terms. So there's 500 words out there, 500,000 words out there. I guess really about 490,000 words out there that we really don't use, that we don't apply. But yet out of those 10,000 words that the average person knows and uses on a regular basis become wars and divorces. But you know, they also become marriages and happiness and joy. Words are so very powerful. Words, the written word is the plan by which God decided that you and I would know about His love and His care for us. We can never take away the power of words. And out of the abundance of heart, we need to be saying the right things. Out of the abundance of our heart, we need to bring forth good things, good treasure, and use those words wisely. What about what we do? What about what we do? You know, when we aren't careful, we can do some things that are very harmful. Notice what Paul said to the Philippians in Philippians 1 and verse 27. He warns us, he tells us, only let your conversation or manner of life be as it becometh, worthy of the gospel of Christ, that whether I come and see you or else be absent, I may hear of your affairs, that ye stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. You can't get past that verse without looking and understanding that's the whole chapter of the whole book of Philippians. Striving together, working together for the faith of the gospel. That's what it's all about. But Paul warns them in the first part of that verse, live as you ought to live. Do as you ought to do. Your manner of life, the things you do in this world, have to be as something that becometh, or the American Standard says, worthy of the gospel. Remember, your name is valuable. Well, I need to live according to that name. Worthy of the gospel. I need to be the kind of Christian that is doing Christian things. That's just being what I ought to be. We must do what God has called us to do. Next, we need to love as God has called us to love. We need to love the way we ought to, or the way God has called us to. John chapter 13, beginning in verse 34, it says, a new commandment I give to you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this, now notice this, it's not only that we ought to do this, but He gives us a good reason and an understanding of it. Not only should we love one another as He has loved us, and that's an enormity. That's hard for us to comprehend how much He's loved us, but we can understand it because God offered His Son for us. Christ offered His life freely as a choice for you and I. He gave us that name. We talk about name again. We're Christians. We wear His name. He gave us those things. And He did so because He loves us. He says, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. That's how much I want you to love one another. But notice this. Talking about that name again. By this, verse 35, shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. That's how the world's going to know that we wear the name Christian. That's how the world's going to know that we're His disciples, if we wear that name, if we have a good name. So we have influence, and we possess influence. And we've got to love the way God loves. That means when I see somebody, I've got to see them the way Christ does. I've got to appreciate their value the way Christ appreciates their value. They were worth dying for. That's hard for us in this life, isn't it? I think it's difficult for us to separate what someone does on this earth in comparison to their soul and the value of it that God created. But we love as God loves. We love in our influence is greatly expressed. There's one more idea, one more thought this morning. We need to influence, and we need to understand that our influence impacts the world however we are. If we're good or if we're bad, whatever the case, we influence. We possess that influence. Look at 1 Peter with me. 1 beginning in verse 14. It says, as obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts of your ignorance, but as He which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation or living. Because it is written, be ye holy, for I am holy. I've got to be godly in my influence. Because holy doesn't mean that better or anything. It means separated. It means pure. I've got to live a separated, pure life. That's the only way I'm going to influence people for good. If I'm not careful, however, and he says in verse 14, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts of your ignorance. Don't live and influence the way you used to. But be holy. It's a charge. It's a call to Christians to be separated, to be different. Isn't that what Christianity is? Being peculiar. It's not a negative term. It's positive, isn't it? I want to be different. I want to wear my name the way I should. Now, sometimes names get confusing. When the 1960s ended, San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district reverted to high rent, and many of the hipsters, or what one writer said were the hippies, had moved down the coast to Santa Cruz. They had children, got married too, and though the particular sequence wasn't always in the proper order, but they named their children different names. They didn't name them Melissa or Brett, and people in the mountains around Santa Cruz grew accustomed to their children playing Frisbee with a little time warp or spring fever or eventually moonbeam or earth or love, and precious promises all ended up in public school. That's when the kindergarten teachers first met Fruit Stand. Every fall, according to tradition, parents bravely applied name tags to their children, kissed them goodbye, and sent them off to school on the bus. So it was for Fruit Stand. The teachers thought that the boy's name was odd, but they tried to make the best of it. Would you like to play with the blocks, Fruit Stand, they offered. And later, Fruit Stand, how about a snack? He accepted hesitantly, and by the end of the day, his name didn't seem any odder than Heathers or Sunrays or Moonbeam. And at dismissal time, the teachers led the children out to the buses. And the teacher said, Fruit Stand, do you know which one is your bus? He didn't answer. That wasn't strange to the teacher because he hadn't answered them all day. Lots of children are shy on their first day of school, and it didn't really matter. The teachers had instructed the parents to write the names of the children's bus stop on the reverse side of their name tags. The teacher simply turned over the tag, and there neatly printed was the word Anthony. You know, the value of our name is very important. We can get confused about what we're following at times. We can be confused about who we're following. But I think at the very conclusion or the end of life, I want my name to be something that I wore proudly. The name Christian, meaning I was faithful to God, meaning I did and lived as He would have me to live, so that I can be like Abel. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, and God testifying of his gifts. Now watch this part of Hebrews 11, verse 4. And by being yet dead, he speaketh. Being dead, he yet speaketh, or still teaches. I want my influence to be like that, to live past me, to continue past this life that I live. And I want people to say that I was a Christian, that I was faithful. My influence is huge. The name I wear is even more important. Wear the name Christian if you don't already. Obey the gospel so that you can live this life in front of people and tell them about a Savior that saved you. If you already are a child of His and you're suffering, maybe even your influence has suffered and you want to make that right. Maybe you just want our help and encouragement as a congregation. If you have a need this morning, please come as we stand and as we sing.